One participant asks, with the pace of business such as it is, fast, it is oftentimes difficult to slow down enough to practice NVC. I know you're going to say it's worth it, but sometimes there really is no time to do it. What suggestions do you have for this type of scenario? How do we bring NVC in then?
Okay, well, I am going to say it's worth it. And actually, I'm going to add some practical tools after this. And I want to say I'm not the only one who's saying it's worth it. If anyone listening is interested, about 5 years ago, for about 3 years, I was consulting regularly with Merck Pharmaceuticals. After the first project, that pretty much, I think, left them astounded on the impact of these skills. They asked me, can we do a study on the impact of this training? We have an FDA testing department, so they're really accustomed to setting up tests, triple-blind studies. So they'd never done this kind of study before, but Merck asked them to get involved. One of the findings from this study, which had pretty phenomenal results, by the way, and the results are on my website at workcollaboratively.com, is that people said repeatedly, it seems like this takes longer up front. It actually is way more efficient in the long run. So analogy I often give is like, are you going to continue to sweep things under the carpet until there's so much debris under the carpet you're tripping over it? How are you maintaining relationships so there is sufficient clarity and trust and engagement so that things are being done agreements are being honored? Because what I find working with organizations is when people go past a certain speed, and there is a lack of trust and communication and clarity and completion, then you have things happening where people aren't even responding to emails. And I get questions in organizations, what do you do when someone's not even replying to you and they're a key player in our matrix system where I need them to complete something so I can get my job completed? What do you do when they're not even picking up the phone or replying to emails? In my opinion, that kind of behavior does not happen in a vacuum. So how do we create a workplace where, again, there's enough systems and regular practice in place that in the end creates far more efficiency and effectiveness? Now, to apply this particular question, I have a few specific suggestions. One is I really encourage people to integrate recapping at work. Recapping, which is most commonly called in NVC circles, reflection or mirroring. I like to call it recapping, especially in a work setting, for a couple of reasons. One is I find people can get easily confused when they hear reflection. They can think they're supposed to reflect on what the person said and start responding, or mirroring it, they're just imitating it back. A recap is exactly what it says it is on a high level. What did you hear the person say? I find repeatedly working with organizations that this gives the biggest bang for people's buck in terms of clarity, connection, shared understanding. And it's pretty easy to learn. And by the way, it's the first step of the NVC model. An observation is what you're either seeing someone do or what you're hearing them say. Most often when we're communicating, not always, but I don't know what ratio to put it, especially in a workplace, often, or not only, every day, a great proportion of the time we're responding to something we heard. This is what I heard you say. That takes about 30 seconds. If things are escalating, if there's any tension, recapping is so helpful. That in itself slows things down for 30 seconds. It allows people to take, in effect, a breath. Even though it's not empathy, that person is being heard on a cognitive level. When I do trainings, I talk about how there's 2 levels of communication that are important. Getting each other on a cognitive level, the recapping helps that, and then getting each other on a core level. In a work setting, I talk about feelings and needs as what's driving the situation. So I want to get people on both levels. What did I hear them say? That's the observation. And then what's driving it? And by the way, this is an aside, but here's an example of how you can talk about NVC in a work setting that really makes sense for people. Let's create shared reality by making sure we got what you said. Then let's find out underneath what you said, what's actually driving it. That's basically the whole NVC model. The last step, of course, is what requests can we make to move things forward? All of those have perfect application in a work setting. So if you can start recapping and putting that into your communication, dropping it in, I think you'll start noticing that'll have a huge impact, and in effect slows things down, paces things a little bit. By the way, when you are recapping, I strongly encourage you to share the need that you're meeting by requesting the recap. That is something unique that nonviolent communication brings to this practice. Other practices do what's called reflection and mirroring. In NVC, we have learned to put the need in there. What's driving the request? So for example, I noticed we've been talking about this 10 minutes. I want confidence that I'm making this clear, that I'm getting it across. Could you just give me a headline back of what you've heard so I know we're on the same page? Perfectly acceptable way to ask for something in a work setting. And again, you already have some needs in there. The other reason I suggest putting the needs in, by the way, is it avoids the person receiving it going into some kind of self-judgment like, oh, what do you think? I'm not listening. I'm not paying attention. So if I take responsibility for it, I notice I'm feeling a little concerned about how many things we've talked about. I want confidence that I've made this clear. I'm taking responsibility for it. The other reason I like that is once people start hearing needs, people start to calm down. Our whole systems energetically, just to put in there, I want confidence that we're on the same page. Just hearing confidence, which is a need, and being on the same page or shared reality, people start to calm down because, we all value those things. It starts to create connection. So use your recap as an opportunity to start bringing needs in that matter to you in the conversation. Here's another quick tool if things are going too quickly. As I like to say, people can use a restroom for a lot of different reasons. We usually call it in the United States a restroom rather than a toilet, or a WC as they might call it in Europe or other parts of the world. So no matter how urgent the meeting is, sometimes people can say, excuse me, there's a call I really want to take. Maybe that call is a check-in with yourself. Excuse me, I just need to use the restroom for a minute. See what opportunities you can take in a way that has integrity for you to have even 30 seconds or a minute to practice some self-empathy. Speaking of self-empathy, I would say, which by the way, in a work setting, I call self-management. See what you can do to practice your self-management skills so that when you're in a meeting in real time, you can be patting your head and rubbing your tummy at the same time. And what I mean by that is no matter what's going on in the situation, be checking in with yourself so that you can be present. You're creating space internally, so you're responding in a way that has a level of connection and awareness and discernment.